Hi, welcome everyone, and thanks ever so much for taking the time out to listen to our first talk. So we at the board had, well, a bit of an idea that things have gone a bit stale and we wanted to lighten your evenings with something a bit more interesting, a bit more different from just training or, you know, and we just want to do a various load of talks on the second Wednesday of every month. So keep an eye on your inboxes. So I'm going to hand over to Ken Bonham, who's our first speaker, and we're very grateful that he could take the time. So Ken, take it away and I'll leave it to you. So thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken and I'm a barn enthusiast. Let me just get rid of that. This is the first time I've done a Zoom talk, so I'm a bit nervous and I hope you'll forgive any slurring, etc. I've done a number of talks about barns to local history societies, community groups, a few archaeological societies. When I do live talks, as it were, I usually take along some of my models, which you can see on my screen. If you've got to the screen, you can see my screen okay, and the display with photographs and things, and a few of the barn books, and you can also see them behind me. So I'm going to start off by saying a little bit about myself. I'm not a professional carpenter. I had to do Latin at school instead of woodwork, which miffed me somewhat. But I did a degree in English and then trained as a primary school teacher and taught in both primary and secondary, various capacities. At one point, I was the IT coordinator in a secondary school. But my last post was with an education action zone in Highgate, which is an inner city area of Birmingham where we live. And amongst other things, I drove the big blue bus, which was equipped as a library and a IT suite. And I used to take it round to the primary schools in the area and have classes all day, both in the IT suite and in the library. And it was my job to make sure everything was laid on for the teachers and that any problems with the IT could be sorted out. One of the other projects we did was with some of the local businesses. They got groups of their workers to volunteer to make little play stands in the playgrounds of various schools. This one, as you can see, is for Jack and Jill, and they could reenact it on there and practice their English and all sorts of things. You can see there some of our volunteers doing the woodwork. And another thing we did was at the end of each summer term, we did a project with the year 6 pupils who were getting ready to leave and had finished their tests. And one of those projects was a bridge building project. And you can see here, we're reenacting that very famous demonstration of how a cantilever bridge works. And we also made model bridges out of coffee stirrers. And they spent all day making the triangles, putting them together, building the bridge. And then at the end of the day, they tested them to destruction. And you can see here a couple of young ladies who actually built a bridge that carried a weight of 3 kilos, which I thought was pretty good. So anyway, that was me as a teacher. And then when I retired, my wife and I decided to get in a lot of the visits to various places of the country that we hadn't been able to do while we were busy teaching. So on one of these journeys, we saw the word Tithe Barn in Gothic script on the map and decided to go and investigate. And this is the road leading up to Asherworth Tithe Barn. But as I subsequently found out, it's not actually a Tithe Barn, but a Grange barn belonging to Bristol Abbey. And Granges were outlying farms, often several hundred miles away from the Mother Abbey, and they always had a barn, a small chapel, which very often later grew into the parish church, and some domestic buildings where the monks and possibly lay brothers would live. So anyway, when I saw this building, I thought it looked rather interesting. We got a bit closer. That's our little yellow peril spark there. As you can see, it's a very large barn with 2 wagon porches and very high doors to allow the wagons loaded with the harvest to go in. And inside, it's quite a simple building. Most of the barns are basically a rectangle with a roof and a door to allow the carts in. Very often the entrance door is much taller than the exit door, because once the cart was in and unloaded, they would collapse the ladder racks at the front and back of the cart and drive it out the back. And that meant, of course, that nobody could sneak out the odd sheaf or two for their own use. This is one of the simplest types of barn roof, simple tie beam with queen post and a collar beam connecting the principal rafters. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with all these terminologies. As I say, I'm an amateur, so I keep trying to learn new words, keep trying to remember the proper terms, and if I forget them, please forgive me. So using my IT skills and my camera, I try to build a model of each of the barns. It helps me to understand how they work. I use a program called SketchUp, which allows you to make 3D models and then export them as 2D graphics. So this is a summary of what I found out about Asherworth. It belonged to the Glasgow Abbey. The precinct had the medieval church, the barn, the domestic buildings. It was built somewhere between 1481 and 1515. It's 125 feet long, 24 feet wide, and it's made up of 10 bays. And the bays are the spaces between the trusses in the roof. It's made of limestone, and it has very heavy limestone tile roof. And over the last 15 years, I've visited barns all over England and some of them on the continent as well. And this is a map of some of the barns that I've visited. If any of you are interested in looking at those, you can access a live version of the map on Google Maps via my website. And this is the introductory page to my website. The address is there. If anyone wants to contact me, searching Great Barns will usually find me. Searching Ken Bonham will find all sorts of other people as well, of course. Or you can just jot that down if you've got pen and pencil handy. www.greatbarns.org.uk. I didn't want to use .com since I didn't want to appear to be a commercial business. Farmers still ask me whether I'm wanting to convert their barns when I go to visit, but that's not the case. Anyway, also there's a link to all my flip books. People have said that I ought to publish a book, but it's far too expensive. So I've made some flip books which are freely available. Just click on there and it takes you to a whole page of them. So I hope some of you will take the time at some point to visit me. This is the page of my flip books. You just click on it. It comes up in a new window in your browser, and you can download them as PDF files if you want to look at them in more detail. So I've been asked to say something about the influences on the design of barns around England. So I've done it in the form of a diagram map. Don't forget that after the Romans left Britain, there were still Romanized British and Celts in England, and there's very little evidence of how they stored their harvest. But with the Saxon invasion, they introduced the timber frame barns. And if any of you are familiar with the Low Countries, Germany, and other places in Northern Europe, where the timber framing tradition is still very strong. And that was brought over, I believe, by the Saxons. And there is some evidence from archaeology as to the line between that and the timber framed aisled barn. In the centre of England, you have crucks, around in the west, you have cruck barns. Mainly, it's divided between this line where you've got the limestone going through England. That's a very good building stone. And then to the north and west, you get other good building stones, sandstone and even granite. To the south and east of that line, it's mainly alluvial clays, some chalk, but not very good building stones. And so the dominant form is timber framing. I had the pleasure of going to a 3-day workshop at the Weldon Downland Museum, and Adrian Goodburn was doing a course on Anglo-Saxon timber method working, and he's given me permission to use these diagrams from his book. Well, it's a paper called Beyond the Post Hole: Notes on Stratigraphy and Timber Building from a London Perspective. The shaded parts are things that were actually found in the waterlogged land on the Thames bank. And this is a development of how he thinks it might have originally appeared. So when we were in Belgium, we went to Bokrijk, the open air museum, and I saw very similar structures actually being in contemporary barns. And also in the Netherlands Open Air Museum, again, the tradition continues for a lot longer than it did in this country. I also had the opportunity to go to Guédelin in Burgundy, where they are building a 14th century castle from scratch. Again, there's some very good videos about it online, but what I found particularly interesting was the workmen's lodges all around the castle, and the use of the A-frame and timber framing, and also here the wooden timber framed mill. So when we come back to this country, we haven't got much of that sort of thing still in existence, but we have got the Regia Anglorum, who are a reenactment society. They've built their own Saxon longhouse at Witchurst in Kent, and this is the view of inside of it. And then, of course, at Weststow, they've reconstructed the houses based on the post holes that they found in the excavation. So this is where the timber framing tradition in England starts, and this is what we have now. So following again that line from basically from Bristol to the Wash and a bit further over, on this side marked in yellow is the area where cruck frames are found, and they're hardly ever found in the green area. In the green area, we have timber framed aisled barns, and hardly any of them in the yellow, certainly not in the tradition. Now, a lot of the barns that are have been restored and are cared for by English Heritage and National Trust are referred to as tithe barns. But a tithe barn is very specifically a barn that was used to store the tithe, the 10th of the harvest of the whole parish, for the rector, and that was his stipend and paid for the upkeep of the church. Although usually the lord of the manor or the local land magnate would also look after the upkeep because it gave him great kudos. Most of the great barns that we see today are monastic barns or Grange barns. A few are manorial barns, and then some are yeoman barns. And if anybody's interested in this summary, I posted it on Facebook, so you can have a look at it there. So, as I said before, many of the abbeys had granges all over the country, and the St Albans Abbey there are actually several surviving Grange barns: Langley Borough Barn, Crotchley Great Barn, and Kingsbury Manor Barn. And there's a couple of very good papers on it. If you search on Crotchley Great Barn or Kingsbury Manor Barn, you'll find them online. So this is the manorial barn at Kingsbury. It used to be aisled on both sides, but the aisle on one side was removed, and that's why we've got this much higher side on this side. This is the interior. Sometimes I'm able to contact the owner and arrange to go and visit. Sometimes I just roll up and knock on the door, and most of the owners are very happy to let me inside once I've convinced them that I'm not from English heritage and wanting to slap some sort of order on it, or not wanting to convert it to a domestic dwelling. This is now used, I believe, as an events venue, but you can see the very tall entrance, and there would have been a lower entrance on this side. And in most cases, with a barn this size, the entrance and mid-stray and threshing floor are in this middle. This is the barn at Crotchley Green. It used to be that you could get there under the aegis of the Three Rivers Museum in Rickmansworth, but since COVID, they haven't managed to restart that. So this is a virtual tour. It's got a very high plinth and plinth wall built of flint and brick, a lot of brick to keep the flint from collapsing. As you can see here, I hope, the plinth wall at this end is nearly as high as a person. At the other end, it's only about 1 meter high, and that's because of this slope that you can see on the land. So that gives a level, a datum for the wall sill. So here you can see the ties to the aisle posts, arch braces going through and up onto the tie beam. Now, there's originally only one entrance to the barn, and it was actually demonstrated that they could turn a cart in the central area here. But that meant that these bays had to be a lot larger than normal. The normal width is 14 to 16 feet, but these are about 20 feet. And that would put a lot of strain on the arcade plate. And you can't see it too well here, but I'll show you another shot where there is actually a sling brace from the wall post to the arcade post, and it's held there via a bird mouth joint. See it better here. There's the sling brace tied into a wall post, and you can see it's quite a large span across there. This was one of the visits organised by the Three Rivers Museum. And this is my summary. You can have perspective views or a plan view, front elevation, all exported from SketchUp. And it was built about 1400, and it's 100 feet long and 40 feet wide. Now, this is a manorial barn where the barn was built for the lord of the manor, and it held the entire harvest of the manor estate, not just the tithe. So it's not a tithe barn, it's actually a manorial barn. It's now run by a charity trust, and it does have open days. So if you're in that area or can get into Gloucestershire, Winterbourne in Gloucestershire, then do look it up online and see when they're open and go and have a look at it. It used to be twice as long as it is now, and probably had two entrances in mid-strays. It's a 14th century barn, but the porches are later. Rather beautiful interior with raised cruck trusses. You can see them embedded in the wall with the timber across. Now, I was told that that's to stop moisture getting into the grain, the end grain of the cruck blade, but there are other interpretations of that. You can clearly see all the pegging, and I think the rafters are later because they're sawn. This is looking the other direction. That is the end wall now, but you can see there's no owl hole in it. So it's probably later when the barn was truncated. And this is another of the open days, another view looking both ways. And that's again my summary. It's 100 feet long, 32 feet wide, 8 bays at the moment, was probably 11 bays originally. Now this is an abbey barn, Glastonbury Abbey barn, in a cruciform shape, and on each gable there is the symbol of one of the 4 evangelists. Interior view again, very nice raised crux, and the ventilation slits at the end, and at the top the trefoil there would also allow owls to come in and keep vermin down. Rather nice view of the structure of the roof. And there's the 4 gables with the 4 evangelists symbol. And there's the summary using SketchUp. Pilton Grange, the roof was destroyed by lightning in the 50s. It was restored by McCurdy and Co. And it's on the land where the Glastonbury Festival is held. And the owner of the farm paid for the restoration of the roof. And there it is. So that's a copy of the original roof. Fortunately, it had been well surveyed and recorded before the roof was destroyed. And again, you see the crucifix form of it. So it's very high status. Glastonbury was one of the richest abbeys in England during the Middle Ages. Another Grange barn, this time timber frame one, Cogglesaw, one of the oldest timber frame barns in England. It was built in about 1250 between the building of the barley barn at Cressing Temple and the wheat barn at Cressing Temple. Originally, it would have been what is called the archaic form, with these long passing timbers going right through from the wall post to the principal rafters, and later it was converted to a crown post roof in the 14th century. Don't know why. It may have been that it was in need of repair and they couldn't get these long timbers anymore. So that's a view inside, and one of the things that tells you it's a very old one is these very square timbers, both for the braces and the posts. Later on, these would tend to be in rectangular in section. And that's one of the pairs of remaining long passing braces meeting at the roof, because you can get up quite high on this observation platform in the wheat barn. And there's a close-up of the crown post roof. And these are the notched lap joints and scarf joints in the barn at Coggeshall. And that's the plan and elevation and the 3D model of Coggeshall Grange barn. Barn at Breeden, it's very easy to get to this because it's near Tewkesbury, just off the M5 motorway, so it's quite accessible from a lot of the country. Notable things here are the Granger's room above the porch and the stone access steps to it. The Granger had the oversight of the barn. He had to make sure that the wheat sheaves were being properly distributed along the barn, that nobody was trying to sneak anything out. View from the other side, and it was very well appointed. He looks as though he must have lived there quite a lot of the year, particularly in the winter, I expect, when it was full of the harvest. There's actually a chimney and a fireplace, which seems a bit dodgy in a barn, but it's all well insulated in stone away from the main body of the barn. Very clear view here of the put log holes, which were where the original scaffolding was put to build the barn in the first place. And then when the logs were withdrawn, the holes were left open to allow extra ventilation. They're about 1 meter apart vertically, so that the builders could lift the stones onto a platform, then onto the platform, onto the next platform, onto the next platform, and so on as they built the barn. If you're interested in how that barn was built, there's a wonderful book called The Great Barn at Breeden, Its Fire and Restoration by F.W.B. Charles. It's not in print, but it is available secondhand. Another view of the end there, you can clearly see the size of the wagon porch here with the Granger's room above. And there's a cutaway diagram again using SketchUp. Internal view, rather a magnificent barn. You can see quite clearly here where the new timbers have been scarfed into the ones destroyed by the fire. Here you can see the Granger's balcony, so you could come out onto that balcony and have a view down the barn to see that everything was being done correctly. And there again are my drawings and the summary of the barn. Another Grange barn at Great Coxwell in Gloucestershire. This actually belonged to Bewley Abbey in Hampshire, so it's about 150 miles away from the mother church. The door at the end was probably put in the 18th century. Originally, that was the exit, and there's the entrance porch with a pedestrian access at the side. And you can see that was originally the entrance for the wagons. Again, you can see very clearly the put-log holes and all the buttressing. But inside, it's a really interesting structure. These plinths are about 2 meters tall. The arcade posts are between 20 and 24 feet tall. And again, this is a very large bay, 20 feet between those and 20 feet wide width of the arcade, sorry, the aisle, sorry, the nave. Right, this is the nave, that's the aisle. I'll get it right one day. You could see double braces, both to the tie beam and to the arcade plate. And again, as in Croxwell Green, there's an extra support from the wall carrying on up to the arcade plate. This is the mid-stray from the entrance gate through to the exit gate, and a small entrance here. Again, there was an Granger's room above here in the roof of the entrance porch. There you can see the support midway along the bay. And you can see it goes from the wall right up to the upper collar. Again, if you get the chance, go and have a visit. William Morris, who helped found the SPB, thought the Great Croxwell Grange was one of the greatest pieces of architecture in England. And there's a summary of it. And you can see the two different types of truss. Finsbury Manor Barn in Kent, largest timber framed iron barn in Kent. It lost, I think it was 3 or 4 bays to a great fire, but it has now been restored, and we'll see some pictures of that at the end. You can see the devastation that was caused by the fire, and that's looking from the later gable entrance down to the burnt bays. They held a series of open days to drum up support for an enabling project to get it repaired. Here you can see some of the burnt timbers from the fire. You can see the rather nice Gothic structure, arch braces with spandrels in here. And I think those are probably to stiffen it up when it's being raised from flat to vertical before putting the crown posts on. But this is very typical of this period of barn in Kent. On this side, you can see one of the burnt posts, and it destroyed 3 or 4 bays, but you can see this is still standing even after burning for something like 5 hours. And here you can see the burn marks and a close-up of the spandrel. Now, I thought this was down to burning, but it's not. It's the tar weathering on the treatment of the outside wall. Originally, it had vertical cladding, plank cladding, later horizontal. If you find a barn with vertical cladding, it's almost certainly 14th century or earlier. Couple of shots of the burning, you notice, although it's burnt on the outside, the tenon has survived unburned, and it takes several hours to burn through an inch of the outside, and the inside is very often still intact. And this is some pictures that Jake Oakley kindly allowed me to use. Thank you, Jake, if you're watching. Of the restoration by Dolman Conservation, and a nice shot of the crown posts there and the finished barn. I haven't managed to go down there yet, but I'm looking forward to visiting it when I get the chance next year. So this is my summary of Finsbury Manor. If anybody's interested in any of these diagrams or models, they are available on 3D Warehouse, which you can search for and access for free. And if you just search my name or Tide Barns, you'll find most of my models. Titchfield Abbey Barn looks like a timber frame barn. It was originally, but on the other side, it's been clad with stone from the Titchfield Abbey itself. After the dissolution of the abbeys, the new landowner decided to make his barn look a bit more fancy. Again, using the 2 sorts of truss, the piled frame truss and the sub truss, with very similar elbow joints there to reach up to the roof. View of the inside, it's now a theatre. You can go and see it. You can go and see productions there, or if you contact the company, they often allow people to go and have a look who are really interested. That's the rear of the seating area. So this is the restaurant area. And that's again my summary of it. And Place Farm Tisbury, now known as Messons, Wiltshire, is now sculpture gallery. This again was originally a base cruck frame, but you can see once they put stone up, they had to fill it in there, and so it looks more like a raised cruck now, but it's actually a base cruck. Again, there's a very nice paper being written about it, and you can search if you search for it online. Interesting collars here, or yokes at the top of the cruck. And again, the summary. Lee Court Grange Barn in Gloucestershire, English heritage, open most of the year round, just west of Worcester. And each of these crucks was made not by splitting a trunk down the middle, but each one is a single tree trunk. It's the biggest cruck structure in Britain, as far as I know, if not in Europe. This is looking towards one end. You notice one of the advantages of crucks, once you've got your cruck up, that supports the roof. Doesn't matter what you do with your wall. It can be flimsy, it can be wattle and daub, it can be oak panels or brick or a mixture of whatever. So most of these barns are a bit like Grandad's hammer. They've had 2 new roofs and 3 new walls, but they're still Grandad's hammer. Another view of it there. And you see the variety of infill, because none of this is load bearing. The load is carried from the roof straight down onto this sandstone plinth. And there again is my summary. Just going to get this last one in. Looks a bit boring from outside. Probably redone 3 or 4 times. But inside is a cruck frame barn. Originally it would have had wattle and daub walls probably. There's still sign of the wall posts in there. You can see bits of them through in the wall. Later stone gable, stone wall added, but you can see the massive purlins carrying the weight of the roof. It would have been a stone tile roof originally. And again, these are about 2 feet across the widest part there, and nearly a foot from side to side. Another view of it there, and you can just see one of the original wall posts still embedded in the wall there. And there's my summary of it. And I'm just going to get this last one in before we take questions. I didn't manage to get inside, but this is Winterbourne Penston in Dorset, and its inside is made up of a hammer beam roof that was taken from Milton Abbey, probably. And Western Hanger Castle Barn, built by Customer Smythe, who was the Excise and Customs Officer of Queen Elizabeth I. So this is one of the great status barns, or built during the Tudor period. It's got a conduit, a culvert for the East Stour River, but inside it actually has a hammer beam roof. Rather simple one, but it does clearly show the principle of the hammer beam. So I wanted to include that before I finish. View from the other end, the doors and window at the end are obviously later piercings. And that's my summary of it. And the great barn at East Wriggleston Hall in Yorkshire. Northern barns, Isle barns, tend to be stone built, lower pitch roof, and much thicker, shorter timbers, probably because of the shorter growth of oak trees in the north. And that also is National Trust and open to the public. Well, I'm going to stop there. I've had a little gallop. I'm going to just quietly flick through some more, but if anyone has questions, if you let Tim know, and you can unmute, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ken. If anyone's got any questions, you can always write them down, or just ask Ken directly. So feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting.
Thank you, Mike.
I was just wondering, what's your process for recording barns, and what kind of degree of accuracy do you look for when you're recording?
Right. Process is, I think, the best way is to call it hit and miss. I haven't worked out a methodology. As I said at the beginning, I started off just because I fell in love with them. And I've now dragged my wife around to about 200 or 300 different barns. I have to promise her a nice medieval church as well. And basically, I photograph them, try and look out for any particular things of interest, have a chat with the owner if the owner's there. Then I do some online research. If you search barn plan or even medieval barn plan, I think you get about 10, and most of them are wedding barns, and they've been totally altered. One of the things I have to do, if I can't find any plan or anything about the dimensions of the barn, I go onto Google Earth and zoom in, and then use the measuring tool to measure it from above. So I get a basic size of the rectangle. And then I use the SketchUp to, first of all, I straighten up one of my photographs, like I've done here, to get a profile and profile of the trusses, and then I work from there. So I should say my accuracy is to the nearest meter. And the same goes for my models. I don't know if you can see the models behind me, but those 1 to 100 scale, done in balsa wood. And again, the Abbotsbury Abbey barn on the top shelf is over 200 feet long. So I had to come right down to 100 scale to have any chance of storing it or doing anything with it. So it's not carpenter accuracy. Hope that answers your question.
That does. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to carry on clicking through these so people can have a look if they've got no questions. If you have got a question, just unmute, and then I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, Ken, if I could ask, you showed one of the barns with a hammer beam roof, and I wondered whether you knew of any others. There's one that I did some research on the Worcestershire-Herefordshire border, but it is quite a rare form to find in a barn.
Yes, you're quite right there. The only other ones I've come across, the barn at Waxham Great Barn and Hales Hall have got a mix of hammer beam and tie beam alternate.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that was them trying to copy Western hanger but not being too convinced about it, or what. But or it might be, you know, we don't really trust it, or it might be they did it all tie beams and then cut some of them off when they thought they'd make it look a bit more swanky.
Yes, indeed. I should say it's very encouraging to see your photographs and to realise that how many have survived in many of them in remarkably good condition, which is a joy, I should say.
Yeah. One of the reasons I decided to build my website and also go onto Facebook was I was hoping to visit the Tithe Barn at Sudbury in Suffolk, and it burnt down before I could get there. So I thought as soon as I visited one, I'll get it online and get it spread out, because once it's online, hopefully it'll be there. And in the case of Pilton Grange, it was only the fact that it had been thoroughly recorded that allowed it to be reconstructed. So I think the more of us that are recording and posting images and plans and stuff, the more chance there is of some more being saved, restored, whatever.
Yeah. I'm very disappointed, Ken, that you don't take a big ladder with you and get up into the roof timbers.
Well, I've played with the idea of a drone, but I'm just not into that.
No.
And I did get myself a laser measure, but there were so many things in the way that it wasn't very successful.
Yes.
Thanks. If you're wondering about all the drapes, this is my wife looking after me. She saw she's very interested in textiles and used to do a lot of embroidery. And she saw an advert or an article about a textile exhibition at Gawthorpe Hall, which I don't know if you know of it. Gawthorpe Hall is actually the home of the National Embroidery Collection, the Shuttleworth Collection, and they had this textile celebration, and it was taking place in the Great Barn. So we contacted them and got permission to go up and have a look at it, and it's draped with these wonderful banners of African textiles. But as you can see here, again, we've got these very, very tall plinths with the posts on top of them. So again, we've got about 30 feet up to the tie beam. And then again, this northern fairly shallow truss on top. And again, you see this rather wonky tie beam to the wall, which I think is rather beautiful. And that again is my diagram of Gawthorpe Hall. These are some of the books I've collected over the years. If you're interested in the Great Barns at Hewley and Great Coxwell, this is a very good book by Horn and Bourne, two architectural historians. Again, it's out of print, but it is available online and secondhand. If any of you are interested in getting secondhand books, can I recommend ABE Books, which is a consortium of independent secondhand booksellers, and they do some very good deals. Kent Barnes, Archaeologia Kantiana is the proceedings of the Kent Archaeology Society, and they do publish their proceedings online. You can get individual papers as PDF files, and some Kentish Barns by Rygold is very good, and it's got lots of diagrams, and they are to scale, Mike. The Archaeology and History of Glastonbury Abbey, I think, is still in print. Rather a quirky book, Cruck Buildings by B. Bunker. I think her theories have been debunked, but I was able to use it to go and visit a number of Cruck barns. And those are some of the websites that I visit to get information. If you don't know of it, the Historic Farm Buildings Group do an annual conference where they go and visit a group of farm buildings in a particular region. It's also always very interesting. One other way I found a barn, I was searching online for some paintings of barns. I came across this one, and it just said Barn at Sheepy Magna, Leicestershire, by Miles Bamford Sharp. So I started researching online and managed to find it. And that's my photograph taken from the same point of view. And I do all sorts of model making. I use styrofoam and balsa to make my scale models. I do virtual models, and I also use SketchUp to make nets so that I can build little cardboard models. And that's my display, and that's my address, my website address, if any of you didn't get it to start with. And I hope I haven't bored you too badly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Jake wanted to ask something, I think. Jake? He's still there, Jake? He's got his hand up. But maybe he's taken it down again.
Oh,
no?
He's come up. Can you unmute yourself, Jake?
Hello.
Oh, hello,
There we
Jake.
go.
Hello. I noticed on the map there's quite a big hole over Wales where there doesn't seem to be many barns. Do we have a theory on why that might be? Is that to do with the church not quite extending that far into Wales during the medieval period? Or is it quite a definite line along the marches where all these nice big barns seem to stop?
Yeah, well, don't forget that my main interest is in threshing barns.
Yeah.
And to have a threshing barn, you need a decent harvest.
Yeah.
And a lot of Wales isn't very flat.
Very true. Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, is that the weather in Wales is pretty rough a lot of the time. They get those westerlies coming in, so barns don't survive so well.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when you're visiting Wales, you tend to get hemmed in by the mountains, so you only visit a small area at a time. So I visited St Fagans, which is the Welsh National Open Air Museum, which is well worth a visit. And they've got a couple of rather nice cruck barns. There's a number of other cruck barns that I want to visit, but from Birmingham, you go sort of into Wales on one of the main roads. And then, as I say, you're stuck in that particular region. So it's on my to-do list, but there aren't that many in Wales anyway, compared with somewhere like Kent, where you've got the big flat areas, or the Midlands, where you've got the Midland Plain.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, nice talking to you, Jake. Thanks for the photographs.
All right, thank you.
I should say, Ken, one of the reasons why you won't find early barns in Wales, I mean, you're quite right about them, you know, that the agriculture doesn't lend itself to large barns and large harvest of crops. But we do have this problem in Wales of Owain Glyndŵr, and there was the uprising of Owain Glyndŵr between 1400 and about sort of 1410. No one quite knows when it ended, but it was remarkable because there are no buildings in Wales apart from, I think, one that predate 1400. There was massive destruction of timber frame buildings. So when I see your lovely 14th century barns in other parts of the country, you won't find them in Wales. So that's one of the reasons why you won't find early ones anyway. So that's always worth remembering. But lots of good crux, lots of lovely crux.
Oh
say.
yes.
Well,
thank you.
If nobody else has any questions, I'd certainly like to thank Ken for giving up his time and producing such an interesting selection of barns. And thanks to everyone for turning up. you know, it's really, really good. This is the first one of this scheme, and let's hope for lots more interesting talks and a good turnout. And over to Caroline to say goodbye, maybe.
Well, just quickly, there was one other question from David Young saying, sorry, you can't use a camera or microphone. Could you say more about how you're photographing the barns? They seem very well illuminated.
Mainly by available light. Some of them have got their own lighting system, but that's not always a benefit because you get a lot of lens flare. I use two cameras. I use a digital camera, single lens digital camera, but I also use my phone, and I find my phone is much better in low light conditions. But then, of course, afterwards I cheat by editing my photographs in a photograph editing suite on my computer. So I do a lot of raising light value, increasing the contrast, cutting the shadow, and so on. Is that okay?
Super, yeah, many thanks.
Okay, if everyone's done, I'd just like to thank you all for coming. And Ken, thank you so much. That was absolutely spot on. Kept me completely engaged, and yeah, look at your inbox, Ken. We'll get you back someday.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like that. Yeah, thanks. I'll be in contact with you, Caroline. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's been an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And thanks for the feedback, everyone, because I'm not used to, you know, having been a school teacher for 40 years, I'm used to getting instant feedback from what people are saying and looking.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, Ken. I think we were all very well engaged, and yeah, it must be a little bit daunting in a way, sort of chatting to many carpenters and.
Well, yes, I mean, as an amateur speaking to experts, it is a bit daunting.
But I think you did brilliant, and yeah, I look forward to hearing from you anyway. Okay,
thanks, Caroline. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Right,
Thanks.
goodbye,
Many
everyone.
thanks, Ken. Really interesting. Brilliant.